Hi, good evening everybody, and welcome to the daily Rambam Shir, lesson 133 and 134. We will be covering the rules of Maaser from chapter 7 until 12. The Jewish world today is marking in the calendar a very significant date. This is Chai Elul, the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. Shnei HaMeoris HaGedolim, the two greatest illuminators, that they brought Judaism and God Almighty to each and every Jew in a very special and intimate way. They have showed how each and every Jew can come closer to God Almighty on a very personal level, and even a person who, from a conventional point of view, looks that he is so distant, he is so lacking of knowledge, lacking of a level of observancy, but nevertheless, even on his own way, he is able to come very close and very deep to God Almighty. In fact, also in the Torah, they discovered new depth in the Torah as well, and also in the study of godliness and discovery of the purpose of creation, and many subjects that the greatest thinkers of the Jewish people have been struggling with those subjects for so many hundreds and thousands of years. They introduced a new light. For that reason, they called Shnei HaMeoris HaGedolim, the greatest illuminator. So, Be'ashgocha Potis, in divine providence, obviously each and every subject we are covering must have sometimes direct and sometimes indirect connection to the day that we are marking and celebrating. So, as we said, the idea of Hasidus is by introducing unconventional ways, untypical ways, new lights. So on the same note, the first chapter of today's Rambam that deals with the halachos, with the rules of Maaser, as well, while conventionally the way a person performs the mitzvah of Maaser, by taking a tenth of his harvest, of his fruit, and giving it to the Levi, or taking it with him to Jerusalem, or giving to the poor. So in today's first chapter, we will discover some unconventional ways that a person can perform this particular mitzvah. Some of those unconventional ways, they are legit and they are acceptable, and some of those unconventional ways, they are unacceptable. We will start with the first topic that the Rambam covers in today's lesson, and this is the topic called Breiro. The literal translation of Breiro is from the roots levarer, to discover, to find out. In what context this issue is being brought? In many contexts in the Torah. To explain it in a very simple way, the issue is if a person can say a vague sentence now without specific commitment about a certain occurrence that will take care in the future, saying something, committing something without any specification, and yet in the future, when the occurrences take place, he may retroactively apply the occurrence towards the past. I will give you an example that we are dealing right now. On a conventional, ideal way, a Maaser is being taken when a person has a pile of fruits and he takes a tenth of these fruits and he clearly designates this tenth whether to the Levi or to Maaser Sheni. This is the conventional way. And then there is an unconventional way. A person says, in the future, whatever will be left over from my food that I will eat, so this particular leftover will retroactively be served as the mysos, as the tenth. Since before he ate that particular leftover fruit was not clearly which one of the fruits will be the leftover. Only after the fact I'm trying to apply it retroactively to the past. See, such a dilemma, it's called the dilemma of Breiro, and the ruling is that if the issue is a biblical issue, mideoiraise, there is no Breiro. I'm not accepting. If the issue is miderabonon, is a rabbinical, I will accept the concept of Breiro. So, the first halacha in today's Rambam, when a person is basically declaring something that he will have as a leftover, can he use this leftover retroactively as a Maaser? And the answer is not. Then there is another type of a unconventional type of Maaser, when a person is not physically taking the Maaser and separating it, but he is designating a specific area in a barrel or in a container, and he have in his mind that this area in the container will be the Maaser or the Tumas Maaser of the container. So then, it depends. If the container contains liquid, so such a declaration is not valid. If the container contains dry goods, so then such a declaration will be valid. The reason why in liquid such a declaration is not going to be valid, because liquid by nature is a very dynamic object, and for that reason the perfect separation is not really a possible, and for that reason it's not going to be acceptable. Another unconventional way where a person is actually designating a Maaser, when a person is basically piling an entire pile of fruits and he is assigning in his mind, he has an accounting system, that this particular pile of fruits that he is storing in this area will be served as a future Maaser, tenth of future action of Maaser that he will take off his field. A person wants to apply very efficient time and inventory management. For that reason, in order to do a conventional type of Maaser, go from each and every field and collect and carry and schlep and store and transport, it takes lots of time, lots of logistics. It is much simpler for him to designate an X amount of fruit where the measurement and the size and the volume of the fruit is very clear, how much is it by him, and it will be served. He goes to one field, and let's say the field produces 100 kilo. He says, well, 100 kilo, 10% of it is 10 kilo. So it applies like type of a clearinghouse. A 10 kilo from the bank that he just opened up, the Maaser bank, is towards 10 kilo of this field. And then he goes to another field until equivalent amount of Maaser debt that he owes happens to match the current pile he already prepared, and that's how he will be applying the Maaser. In other words, a person designates a X amount of fruits in order for them to serve as a Maaser for future fields that he will have. Such an activity is permitted. It is an unconventional way, but yet, as far as efficiency, as far as the bottom line results, it comes out the same way as he gives a conventional Maaser. There is another example how a person can apply a unconventional giving of a Maaser, and on the way he will also display and express some generosity and kindness towards the needy. He happens to have a friend who is in need of a loan, and this friend happens to be a Levi, or he happens to be a poor man. As we know that in the cycle of the 6 years, while the first, second, fourth and fifth year of the cycle, the Maaser, the second Maaser is the Maaser Sheni, yet in the third and in the sixth year of the cycle, the second Maaser is a Maaser Oni. So we're talking over here that this particular person who borrowed money from him happens to be or a poor man or a Levi. And since anyway he is obligated to give a tenth of his products to the Levi, so he tells to him like this: here is a perfect way to give you a loan and also to pay back the loan from you without much effort on your side. What will be the arrangement? Very simply, take the $100. This is a loan for you. How you will pay back? Don't worry. I have to give you every season Maaser Rishon, and in case you are a poor man, I have to give you every third year a Maaser Oni. So the Maaser Oni that I will have to give you in the future, according to the amount of money that I will have to give you, instead to give it to you, I will deduct it from your loan, from the loan that you owe me. And that's how slowly, over the years, I will be able to get back full payment of the loan. So this is a legal and legit way to collect back the Maaser, to collect back the loan, and also to perform my obligation towards Maaser Rishon, because in a Maaser Rishon and a Maaser Oni, there is no element of kedusha, of holiness. It's a monetary element that a certain value of money belongs to you. So this arrangement will be perfect as long as I am giving it to you or giving it on your behalf and collecting back on your payment by assigning a third party that takes on your behalf the Maaser Rishon and the Maaser Oni. Also, another requirement that in such a case, when I'm deducting the debt that you owe me via the Maaser Rishon or the Maaser Oni, that you must be alive. The person who owes me the money needs to be alive. In case that we're talking about a poor man, he also needs to be poor. At the moment that the person is not alive anymore, or the poor man became rich, so therefore the ability of myself to get away from the actual distribution of my solution cease to exist. And at that time, I have to pay you the actual, I have to pay you the actual, the actual, the actual money. Now, so this is one ruling. There is another ruling that is also very important to remember. If poor people have exchanged their gifts with the fruits of the balabais, of the actual owner, poor people, all their gifts are considered to be hefker, and they are exempt from Maaser. So at the moment that they have exchange with the owner, so their fruits will be exempt, and the owner's fruit will be obligated. In the second chapters of today's shiur, the Rambam deals with different types of ta'arives. Ta'arives is mixture. When we know sometimes a tevel, fruits of tevel are being mixed with fruits of chulin. Tevel is basically a pile of fruits that no Maaser was taken from it, and therefore it is forbidden to benefit from this type of fruit. Let me check. So in the second chapter, we're dealing with different types of mixture. So generally speaking, there is two types of mixture. There is min b'she'enoi minoi. Min b'she'enoi minoi, when we're talking over here about two different tastes, and the ruling when something is two different tastes that they are mixed with each other, so the ruling it will be only benoisen tam, when actual item is giving a taste in the other items. So then if there is a taste, it is forbidden. If there is no taste, it will be permitted. When we're speaking over here about min beminoi, given the fact that we're talking over here about tevel, tevel is something that is called yeshloi matirin. Yeshloi matirin, it has a solution. Anything that is tevel, at the moment that you're taking turmois and maisois, so then you're taking care of the problem. So therefore, min beminoi must be taken Maaser according to the measurement, according to the size of the pile that is tevel. At the moment that I don't have any other fruits, what we call mimoki macher, another place to take Maaser on behalf of the tevel, so then I will have to take and separate between the tevel and the chulin, and they take an extra fraction from the chulin according to the contribution of the Tumo and Tumas Maaser. The reason why I need this extra fraction to take it away, because it is necessary to make a heker, to make a recognition from the item that is chulin mesukonim, what is called fixed chulin, proper, kosher, and accessible fruit, and between the tevel. Another type of a sofek, of a mixture, a situation, when a person remembers that he designated in a certain, we're talking over here when a person possesses lots of barrels, and the barrels are organized in a very square manner, let's say 10 by 10 by 10, he has 100 barrels, and he remembers that he designated in the external line or in midway. So the general ruling, how he will take care to solve this doubt that he is exposed in this condition, he will have to mix each and every barrel that is or can tolerate the definition, whether the definition of the edge of the storage or can tolerate the definition of the middle. So any barrel in his storage that can tolerate the interpretation of his definition will be mixed with each other, and from the mixture he will take the proper measurement that represents the Maaser, the tenth of the wine in this case. In the third chapter of the first lesson, lesson 133, the Rambam displays the history of the term which is called Dmai. Dmai consists of two words, do, mai. Do is this, mai, what is. Any type of a fruit that there is a lack of clarity whether Maasos were taken from it. And he gives a very interesting story at the times of Yochanan Kohen Gadol, in the times of Shimon HaTzadik. Everybody knows in the prayers of the Hanukkah, we're mentioning about a great man that his children, they were the fighters who brought us the miracle of Hanukkah thanks to their victory. They were the children of Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Yochanan Kohen Gadol, he was the high priest who served as a high priest for over 80 years. And many great things he have instituted. Unfortunately, his end was quite tragically. Though he was a very pious, committed Jew, but at a certain point, towards the end of his life, he turned to be a tziduki. A tziduki is this sect that have denied the authenticity of the oral tradition. It was a sect who we have suffered lots from them. They brought a lot of trouble. They have corrupted the purity in the service of the temple, and so on. I heard once a beautiful explanation of the Rebbe that he explains that the word of tziduki comes from the roots of a person who constantly matzdik es atzmoi. He was always right. He couldn't find something wrong in himself. When a person was lacking the humility to go to look at himself and to admit his mistakes, so it led him in reality to come and to reach such a horrendous level as a tziduki. Nevertheless, in his time, they went to inspect amongst the Jews how careful they are in the practice of Tumois and Maaseros. So they have discovered the following things. That when it comes to Tumo Gdoilo is the initial contribution of about 2% from the harvest and the fruits that each and every one is committed to take out of his produce. They were very, very careful in it. They were very careful. But when it came to Maaseros, to the 10th, they were not careful in it. And for that reason, they have instituted the following decree, that if a person buys a product from someone who is not reliable or he is suspected whether he was taking a Maaser or not, he must, Tumo he doesn't need to take, but Tumas Maaser he needs to take. Now, what is Tumas Maaser? Maaser, generally, as I said before, the majority of the years, all the years, Maaser Rishon is being given to the Levi. But this has no Kedusha, and therefore it is only a monetary object. Like any monetary object, the ruling is Hamoitze Mechaveroi Olovorayim. So the actual Levi cannot go and claim this particular fruits as a Maaser if no proof he can go and provide that this belongs to him. But nevertheless, there is an issue that every Levi must separate Tumas Maaser, a tenth of what he gets, he needs to give it to the Kohen. And if a person doesn't give it, it becomes tevel, and there is exposure to misobidei shomayim. So for that reason, each and every person who was buying a fruit from someone who is suspected that he may not separated the Maaseros, he needs to declare in the following ritual. He needs to say like this: take about 8% of his fruit, and he can declare it like this. This type of a percent is a part of the Maaser, and the rest of the Maaser is next to it. And the original part, which I have just declared as a Maaser, where the real Maaser is next to it, that will be turned to Tumas Maaser. Then there is another issue of Maaser Sheni. Maaser Sheni is the second Maaser that he needs to take with him to Yerushalayim. So this extra Maaser that he needs to take with him to Yerushalayim, he can go and redeem it with money. Since he redeems this extra Maaser with money, he has fulfilled the mitzvah. And by the way, the same thing he will also declare when it comes to Hafroshas Chalo. When he takes from the baker as well, given that this Dmai, when a person takes a Maaser from something that is not certainly that he needs to do it midoiraisa, he does it miderabonon. He does it miderabonon, rabbinically as a Dmai. And as I said at the beginning of the shir, when it comes to an item deoiraisa, so midoiraisa I say there is no breira. A person cannot apply something in the present retroactively towards the past. But when it comes to the Rabbonon, a person can declare and apply and adapt the principle of Breiro. For example, if a person knows that tomorrow he will be hosted by a friend of his, and the friend of his is Amoretz, and Amoretz is not suspected whether he took the Maaser or not, but he may took, he may did not take. He can have in mind that whatever will be left over from the drinks or from the food that will be served to me, so this particular leftover will be used as both Tumas Maaser and as well Maaser Sheni, and the Maaser Sheni will be redeemed right now. There is also another issue when a person who is a chover, a person who is considered to be a reliable person to take stumos and maisos, he happens to take and chop the grapes for winery to make with another friends of him that he is am horetz and is suspected of tumos and maisos. So he must take to maisos not only on his part but also on behalf of his friend that he suspected that he may have not done so. In lesson 134, the first topic covers what is required from an individual who is under presumption of Amoretz. Amoretz is an individual who is suspected not to be careful in taking maisos. How can he change and switch a status into a chover? A chover is a presumed individual who actually careful and takes the tumos and maisos. So first of all, he needs to accept publicly in front of 3 people that he will take Maaser, he will give a tenth of anything he acquires, everything he sells, and everything he consumes. And when 2 reliable witnesses are testifying that he accepted those things publicly, and indeed he follows through on his commitment, then he turns to be a chover. There are situations when those people who are associated with him, they have the same status, and sometimes not. Example, a daughter of Am Horetz who got married with a chover. She needs to accept upon her to become a chover. If she has not accepted upon her, though she is married to a chover, nevertheless she'll have a status of Am Horetz. The opposite, if a daughter of a chover got married with an Am Horetz, though she is married with an Am Horetz, nevertheless she is presumed with the status that she was carrying until now, and she is presumed to be a chover until I'll have a reason to suspect otherwise. On the other hand, if, let's say, a person is considered to be a chover, a reliable man, but some of his family members, when a person is not reliable, but some of the family members are reliable, still okay to go and consume from them and rely upon their declaration. Sometimes there is a situation when a couple, the husband will be reliable and the wife not. Sometimes the opposite, the husband won't be reliable because he is an Am Horetz, but the wife is because she is a chover. So the general ruling, the man is in charge of the trading aspect, buying and selling, and the wife, she is generally in charge of hosting. So when it comes to be hosted by this individual, the status of the lady will determine whether the food is dmai or not, and when it comes to trade, the status of the husband will determine whether it's okay to trade with him or not. When a chover is being employed as a waiter or any other important function in a party of Am Horetz, so his functioning in that role is serving as a kashrus certificate, as a endorsement to the level of the kashrus, how kosher the meal is. It reminds me a story that once upon a time in a Farbrengen, the Rebbe explained how come one politician in Israel asked to meet with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe rejected to meet with him. And the Rebbe said for a few reasons. First of all, this particular individual is notorious always to say the opposite of the truth. But further than this, if the Rebbe will meet with him, this meeting will be utilized by this individual to use that meeting as an endorsement for his legitimacy. For example, the Rebbe linked a story in the Talmud that it says if Rish Lakish used to say and to greet a person in the market, people who witnessing Rish Lakish greeting that person, they will have assigned so much credit to this person that they will believe in his word and lend him money without asking of guaranteeing, which shows that sometimes an endorsement of kashrus can come in a very roundabout way and not necessarily in an outright way. Sometimes, given the Dmai is a rabbinical institution, because Midei Iraiso, they would have been reliable. So for that reason, a few exceptions under certain condition where the rabbis permitted to benefit from Dmai. For example, poor people who are asking for donation, it's okay to feed them with Dmai as long as you're informing them about Dmai. Gaboy Tzedoko, collector of Tzedoko, they can both collect from houses even Dmai, and same as well also to share with the recipients of the Tzedoko also the idea of Dmai. In the 11th chapter, the second chapter of lesson 134, the Rambam deals with a concept of lifnei iver lo yisiten mirshoy. Don't put a stumbling block in front of a blind man. The application of this ruling comes when a person may put a stumbling block in front of a blind man when he sells to another person an item that is Dmai. So for the public, it is forbidden to sell Dmai. However, to a Talmid Chacham, to a Chover, a person who is a Chover, it is permitted to sell Dmai, since he will assume that this is Me'uso only if he gets it from, if he hears from a reliable source that this is indeed kosher. However, people who are selling wholesale, since they adding more on their own, they are exempt from taking a Maaser from Dmai, and the rabbis instituted that the buyer, he is the one who needs to take the Maaser from Dmai. If the buyer and seller took upon themselves mutually to arrange and to fix the fruits, so the Trumas Maaser, which is the 1% of the fruit, must be given by the seller, and Maaser Sheni, which is 10% of the fruit, must be separated by the buyer. Although it is a higher percentage, but nevertheless, since Maaser Sheni, by the end of the day, is benefiting the actual person who contributes it, because Maaser Sheni is not given to another party. Maaser Sheni is a separation of a certain percentage in order to take this percentage to Jerusalem and consume it in a state of taharo, or to take the exchange of the money that is in the value of the Maaser Sheni and purchase things in Yerushalayim and consume them as well betahara. So since by the end of the day he's not giving it to another party, but he is the actual beneficiary for it, for that reason he is giving the buyer, he is the one who gives the 10% Maaser Sheni. Sometimes a trade can be done also in a very roundabout way. Until now we know a conventional way: when somebody sells, the other one pays money. However, when two brothers are sharing an inheritance and they deciding amongst themselves, where one brother will take, let's say, the oranges and the other brother will take the grapes from the inheritance, so this is considered a trade. So for that reason, if some of those products happens to be in the status of Dmai, such a division of an inheritance is forbidden, because there is an actual trades in the Dmai. However, if both the actual division of the inheritance, that both of them are getting identical objects, for example, we're talking over here 50 kilo of wheat versus 55 kilo of wheat, or something like this. Since we're talking about the same product, so it's not considered a trade, and it's okay to divide amongst two heirs this type of division. Not only it is forbidden to sell Dmai, but it's also forbidden for a person who carries fruit that they are Dmai and happens to be a very heavy load, and he wants to reduce the load. He is forbidden to throw it on the street. The reason? Because another person may find them and eat it, consume it, and therefore again he is putting a stumbling block in front of a blind man. They took it even further. When an individual happens to stay in a hotel and he wants to give his flour to the innkeeper to go and bake it, he should be suspecting that the actual bread that she's giving back to him needs to have a Maaser, because again she may switch the product, the flour he gave her, which is kosher, with another flour that is not kosher. The only one who is not suspected to go and switch it, if it's not an innkeeper but his own relative. Again, only if he did not give her, if he gave her the yeast. If he relies on her yeast, so again there is a possibility that the yeast will be Dmai. The third chapter, which is the 12th chapter of Hilchos Maaser and the third chapter of lesson 134, is the size of credit and reliability that I'm assigning to people with a damaged credit. We spoke before about the basis of the status of Dmai that came as a result of realizing that a large segment in our society, they are suspected not to separate and give mysois. So even those people, under certain condition, I will believe them when they are claiming that this is Maaser. For example, on Shabbos, on the day of Shabbos, even if a person who is generally suspected not to be careful in Maaseros, but he tells you on Shabbos that this fruit, Maaseros were taken from it, I will believe him. Reason? Because Mahoretz cannot say a lie on Shabbos. The fear and the respect that they have towards the Shabbos will prevent them to say a lie on Shabbos. But this is only limited to Shabbos only. At the moment that Shabbos is out, then they are back to their original status, and even what he already ate on Shabbos must be taken Maaser after Shabbos. Another exception, if I have noticed someone who is generally suspected in Tumas and Maaseros, that he was careful, he took a Tumas Maaser, and even when something were mixed with other fruits, he was very careful to give it or to sell it to a kohen. At the moment that he demonstrated with his action that he really pays attention to Tumas, I will assign reliability to him. There is two levels of Maaser. There is Maaser Rishon and Maaser Sheni. Maaser Rishon is a very light Maaser because again there is only a monetary issue. Maaser Sheni is a very severe issue because it must be taken to Yerushalayim. So if I see that a person was careful even on a light issue, like Maaser Rishon, so how much more so I will believe him when he declares something as a Maaser Sheni. However, if a person, I was not clear or he has not demonstrated honesty about Maaser Rishon, then not necessarily Maaser Sheni, I won't trust him entirely. So for that reason, if a person will declare something as a Maaser Sheni, I will apply both severities. On one hand, I will redeem the Maaser Sheni, but on the other hand, I will still going to treat this fruit as tevel, and for that reason, the Tumas Maaser will be taken from them. Another exception where generally a person who is generally not reliable, but nevertheless I will believe him, when I am sending an unreliable person to go and purchase a certain fruit from a certain seller, a very specific seller. So in such a case, when I'm actually sending him to a very specific seller, then he will be reliable that he purchased the fruit from that seller. And the reason why he will be reliable, based on the ruling Milso de Avido de Gluyo. Anything that is given to be discovered, he will be reliable. I have entered to a city and I am not familiar with people, but I hear from one person who, after asking him who is over here reliable upon Maaseros, and he is pointing this individual, and I'm going to that individual who he pointed, and I'm asking him who is reliable upon over here Chodosh or other Isurim. He says the same individual who was testifying about me. Although seemingly they are scratching each other backs, and they are so-called accommodating towards each other, nevertheless, they will be reliable. There is, however, if two peddlers came to this city, and both of the peddlers are offering fruits or vegetables, and each and every one testifying upon the other one, then I won't believe them, because I will assume that each and every one of them is practicing kickbacks towards each other. And the reason is because the likelihood of peddlers who came to a town, they are in a rush to generate a quick buck. For that reason, their declaration is not valuable. There is another case where a person in Syria, which we have said before that the level of holiness in Syria is not really biblical, is more rabbinical, it's somewhere in the gray area. So in the Syria, if a person sells tumois and he sells over their fruits, and he tells you that though this is Syria, the fruits are from Israel, but I was the one who was taking tumois and maisois from that fruit. So since he has a reliability of hapeshe osar hu hapeshe itil, I will believe him. All of those cases where we have just right now spoke about, where people who their credit is under doubt, they will be reliable as long as they have actually only under doubt. At the moment a person already demonstrated a distrust, so then the level of suspicion towards him will remain. There is still, even if a person who was already demonstrating an act of distrust, he will still maintain a level of reliability when he is declaring about another person's kashrus. Then he will be believed. And the reason is, there is a ruling, Ein odom choite veloi loi. No one will make and commit a sin where he personally not going to gain anything by the sin. For example, this particular principle serves as a reason for the great benefits we are deriving from a Hasidic Farbrengen. The Rebbe brings in Hayom Yom, when two people meet each other and they discussing amongst themselves how to improve their ways to serve God Almighty. So their discussion will be effective for the following reason. Because their discussion is basically two godly souls in a battlefield against one animal soul. And the question, how come I say two godly souls versus one animal soul? Why wouldn't it be 2 versus 2? And the answer is based on this principle that we have just said. Because a person, his animal soul is active and kicking only when he personally will gain a benefit. But in order that he won't gain benefit, so when it comes to other person's service of Hashem, his animal soul doesn't care that he will serve Hashem. And for that reason, we are so fortunate that we have an opportunity every now and then, and especially such Yomei Sgulo, such auspicious days like Chai Elul, and here comes the month of Chodesh Hashvi, that is Musba Bakoil, to have so many more Farbrengens. God bless you all. We should have a great year, a sweet year, and a successful year, Begashmius, Ruchnius, and everything we need.